a podcast by VisionPoint Marketing.
Hey, thank you for joining us today. I'm Dana Cruikshank, Vice President of Business Development here at VisionPoint Marketing. I am joined today by Kim Shank, who is a account director here with us at VisionPoint and also a former senior director of admissions with over 13 years of experience in enrollment management, which is remarkable. So, look, so excited to have you. I mean, you've been with us now, what, for about a year now? Is that right?
Almost. I started in March. March 11th was my first day.
Gotcha. Started at Vision Point on March 11th. So that's great. And then prior to that, like we just said, 13 years in enrollment management. Tell me a little bit about the roles that you had back in the day.
Back in the day, it was behind a table. I was a road warrior for about 6 years, and that yielded a ton of experience working with prospective students, their families, the challenges, what the industry was. And now I've had the opportunity to see it change over the past, I'd say, 5 years specifically. But prior to that, like I said, I was a road warrior for about 6 years. So I was traveling. I had different territories, geographic territories, and then different responsibilities within the office that I was responsible for producing on. And throughout that, I really was drawn into the ambassador organization. So working with our current students and turning them into mini recruiters, I'd say, for admissions. And then also the events. So I started to put together all of our yield events. I started to work primarily with the ambassadors while I still had a recruitment territory. So I shifted into this kind of campus visit guru where I was overseeing all of the campus visit operation. I was the director of campus visit operations. I oversaw the ambassadors, the student employees. And then from there, I got really looped into relationships and building relationships outside of admissions. So with different for example, the Downtown Bethlehem Association, they asked me to start working with partners and businesses down there to pair up with them in the community to assist with admissions events and different types of initiatives that we had with admissions and getting prospective students downtown, all while retaining some sort of small recruitment territory. So I was always still connected to recruiting a group of students no matter what, even if it was small, even if I was responsible for 10 deposits coming in with the class, I still had some sort of connection.
Always had your hands on the pulse, as it were. Yeah.
Yes. So that I knew what I was doing. And then throughout that, I then started to become more involved with the overall operation of admissions, really starting to look into strategically how we would meet our class. And that's when a new vice president came in and decided that I would be a good director of admissions, which I told her she was absolutely crazy. I am not a director of admissions. And I became the director of admissions and started
voluntold to do the job, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. So I fell into that, and she was the best person. She was the former VP at Drew. Iona. I mean, she's just a legend in higher ed. So
wow,
I was very fortunate. So then I became the director of admissions, really started to get into the marketing, how we're speaking to students, and through what types of methods that we were using. I oversaw the staff, and then senior director of admissions, got through COVID and felt pretty burnt out, and got to VisionPoint. VisionPoint took me in.
Well, that's great. And I know up there at Moravian, there in Eastern Pennsylvania, that's a pretty competitive part of the country to be in for a lot of institutions, declining demographics and so forth. So
yes, hotbed. Yeah, we were in a lot of competitive negotiations with families. Let's just say that.
Sure. I can only imagine. So Well, by the time folks are hearing this message, it'll be 2023, and that path that you just described of starting out, doing the admissions fairs, doing that, being that road warrior for years, and just moving up, moving up, moving up. That's a pretty familiar story to a lot of folks in the admissions world, either who have completed that same journey and they're directors of admissions or admissions marketing themselves, or are somewhere kind of on that path right now. I'm just kind of curious now, with all those years of experience, as well as time now spent on the other side of the fence here at VisionPoint, folks are coming back into this new year. 2023 is all in front of them. It's a challenging time, challenging world. Just kind of curious, what are some things that what are some things that you would tell them, based on what you know now and haven't been in their shoes?
I would say, for right now, January, February, I would say don't give up. Don't stay positive. Either you're coming back from the holiday feeling refreshed and re-energized, or you're feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders because of the fact that you're responsible for a budget. And I know that there are a lot of different sayings that people will throw out there. And those corny sayings, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But we all know in higher ed and in admissions, yes, there's the marathon, but there are little mini sprints throughout that marathon that you need to be able to respond to, and you need to be able to address in the moment and do so that it's strategic and stays aligned with what the end goal is.
Talk to me about what some of those mini sprints might look like, actually.
Oh, okay. Yes. So mini sprints, I would say, for example, that your end goal, your number of butts and seats that you need to get to is 350, for example. You have, as an enrollment manager, assigned each admission geographic territory. That manager is responsible for bringing in a certain number of students, for example. And you on a almost everyday basis, once you're coming back from break, you're analyzing that funnel, you're going through and you're seeing that one of your main recruiters that is responsible for bringing in, let's say, 20% of the incoming deposits. Those application numbers are down. But overall, you're hitting your goals. You know that you've got the applications. You're on track to get your number of applications, to get to your accepts, to get to your deposits. But you know that this counselor is saying to themselves, I don't think I'm going to get to my app goal, Kim. That's a sprint opportunity, because you know that you have to respond quickly and swiftly to be able to address that issue. You can't let one of your largest, I would say, cohorts of applicants, accepts, and deposits come in short, because that will overall affect the end goal. So you would want to respond to, by example, just putting out there an opportunity, working with your marketing partner and going out there to re-engage with students that are still in the inquiry phase. Maybe they're a prospect in your CRM, and you have this opportunity, this glowing opportunity. We would sometimes use these special incentives as like a certain geographic location application, for example. It's a priority app. You've been selected for a priority application, and we really want to see you apply. So you re-engage and you give them this opportunity to come through and say, oh my gosh, I was selected. I was chosen. Yep. So get those app numbers up. That's a sprint. I mean, that's like, you need to get your communications, your letters out to families. You're going throughout the whole entire communication pretty much journey in a matter of maybe 2 or 3 weeks. So you're doing it quickly. You're working with your marketing office to get the letters drafted, written. You're working with your CRM specialists to get the email journeys out. you're working with your counselor to make sure that they're texting and they're going through all of the students that they need to hit, because it's a certain number of students that you're trying to focus on. So those little sprints, depending on where you are in the funnel, do come up.
Gotcha. So, so what you're saying is that that year-long cycle now, it's not it is a marathon, and then every 1.5 miles or so, you have to do a 40-yard dash or some such to complete it through.
That's a great way of describing it. Absolutely. That year-long cycle, that cyclical cycle, seasonality of admissions is gone.
Really?
Yes. I don't think that it's in my opinion, what I have seen over the years is that it was a very predictable almost cycle. You're sitting there and you're saying, okay, I'm going to recruit in the fall. I'm going to go out to my high schools. I'm going to gather. And then all of these kids are going to apply at once, and they're all going to get accepted at once, and they're all going to get their financial aid awards, and everybody's going to be happy in this early winter, spring time frame. And then we're going to have our accepted students days in April and March. And we're just, everybody's going to be deposited by that May 1st deadline. Well, obviously we know NACAC changed those rules, but throughout that change, there has been a shift. I mean, we have students that are not looking at schools necessarily in the fall anymore. There's too many competing priorities in the fall. Sometimes it could be sports. So you have this group of students that are really starting to look now in the early spring. You have different starts at different schools, depending on what kind of student you come in as. There are, I would say you're yielding, you're recruiting, you're yielding. It's all happening at the same time now.
Just that. Everything.
Yeah. So as an enrollment manager, you've got to be able to discern in the data that you're yanking out of your CRM. You've got to be able to discern. You can look at a dashboard, and a dashboard can tell you a story, but you've got to be able to really look into the different populations that are on that dashboard to make the right assumption on how to move forward.
Gotcha. So, but I think when folks are listening to this, we're getting into the awards season for the movies, and hopefully one of my favorite movies of 2022 has gotten nominated, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Sounds like that's a pretty good description of the admission cycle right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Yes, that is an accurate description for a movie title. Yes.
Well, there it is, a multiverse of possibilities, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess kind of zooming out a little bit more as well, thinking through just where you are now, almost a year working at VisionPoint, getting to see the enrollment operations at a number of different institutions, but also just having a little bit of perspective from that kind of day-to-day spot. In addition to, being able to stay focused for the marathon and all, what else would you want to share with your former colleagues, just based on this newfound perspective?
I would 100% lean more on my marketing partner to do strategic retargeting to different populations, depending on where you are in the cycle and depending on what areas you may not be hitting benchmarks or you need to get additional messaging out. And a lot of what needs to happen, you need a marketing partner that's going to be nimble enough to be able to respond to that and to be able to do it quickly and do it well. But so much of what a good admissions office does is they do a really good job at micro recruiting, and that's your people. Those are your admissions counselors. Those are the people that are making and building those relationships. But there's a lot of nuances to the messaging that gets out there. And if I had the ability to go back, I would ask for additional resources in my relationship with my marketing partners to have different messaging and ad sets and advertising to go out to specific populations depending on where we are in the cycle. Just for example, you're coming back in January and February, you're looking at your application numbers. You may see that you've hit the application number, but your number of incompletes are through the roof. Where's the affinity with those students? I would be taking all of those incomplete applications and I would take those applicants and I would put them in and package them into a CRM list. I would have some sort of messaging to retarget those folks on different platforms and meeting them where they are at. And that's the biggest thing is, you can continue to email and blast all of your students, your parents, your influencers, but are they really opening that email? Are they really reading that? Or would a display banner when they're surfing the web be something that is kind of big brother creepy, but also reminding them, hey, I need to complete my application, or did I submit the FAFSA? I may have submitted it, but did I do that? Did I add that college? And they're telling me to do that. Maybe I didn't do it. I need to go back into my FAFSA and double check. Or did I visit, did I register for that accepted students day? I don't know. I need to double check. So those different types of lists I would want to package up, send over, and look at creative and it not just be an email. I would rather look at different ways of targeting those folks.
Yeah. So 2022, the big buzzword that we all heard was the Great Resignation and so forth. A lot of folks left and moved on to other positions. There has been some really eye-opening research in the last, just in the last month or so, about just how, frankly, just demoralized a lot of folks in higher education administration are, and that includes enrollment marketing, enrollment directors, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And a lot of folks are thinking about, hey, I just need to get out of higher ed altogether. This things have changed so much. I'm not getting the resources I need and so forth. What would you say to somebody in that position right now?
That's a really good question.
You can come back to it too.
I know how it feels, so I would definitely have empathy. I think that so much of what the expectation previously was of this role doesn't necessarily fit the box or the mold of what the type of employee is now. I want to be very careful with this. Because work-life balance is extremely important, and it is a cultural push. And unfortunately, with this type of work, there is not, number one, the work-life balance, because you're meeting people where they're at, and a lot of that is in the evenings. You're calling people, you're working on the weekends so that you're open for business so people can come and visit. So you're being pulled to work a lot of hours without having we'll just put it out there, a lot of higher ed institutions don't have the budgets to pay and to retain and properly afford the talent that they have and that they're keeping. So there has to be other ways to keep employees engaged and to keep employees motivated. And that's really trying to get to know them and kind of finding those motivators. But I would say if you're looking to jump ship, I can't say don't do it, because I did it. I went to the other side. So, and I am happy with my choice. But I would say if it's going to work for you to stay in the position, I implore you to explore different options to feel valued and motivated. And if you feel like you can't do that at that institution, There are plenty of people that are looking right now for good, strong work ethic, employees that have work ethic, really, and are willing to pay. I can tell you that a lot of my friends are struggling right now to fill positions that that need that. They're just not there. The bodies are not there to fill them.
There's so much there that I love what you just said. I left higher ed. I left the institutional side of higher ed about 5 years ago. And so much what you're saying really resonates with me that as a leader, your own people, their expectations around work have changed. And it can be hard within the strictures of an institution to be able to kind of pivot and adjust to those new realities. But it's just what we have to do at the same time. One other thing too that I have seen, there's been kind of this shift. I feel like really, particularly institutions that were in smaller cities, more economically challenged areas, rural areas, and so forth. There's kind of always this assumption of, well, these are good jobs in this area. And we will always have a seemingly inexhaustible supply of people who will want to get in to work at the university because this is a good, stable job. And therefore, we can have those expectations on them of you're going to be working those weekends and nights. You're going to be doing these things. And I wonder to the extent of which that calculus has really changed. And institutions are just now stepping up to that realization of, oh, people have options, especially with remote and hybrid work. Oh, people may not be looking for a 30-year career at the institution no matter what, and so forth. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say introducing the remote option after COVID has definitely opened up eyes.
Yeah. It's interesting in that regard. Well, let me ask you a question in a similar vein. So given your experience and given everything that you've seen and given your new role and so forth, what would you say to college presidents right now, or these VPs of enrollment, or whatever that position looks like, the folks to whom you and your former peers were reporting to in the past, not to your specific president, former president, of course, but just in general, leadership, if you could tell them a message on behalf of everybody else of, maybe something that they just don't quite get, what would that be?
I would first start from the beginning, and it's so almost like you shouldn't even say it, but I would start to walk away from the strategy of list buys.
Tell me more. Okay, that's interesting. Tell me more.
List buys for me have been a great experience in understanding how traditionally we have gotten the population of students that we have, but truthfully, they don't really come through the funnel. And I feel as if reinvesting that money into different initiatives, marketing initiatives, to find different ways to gather those leads and then work those leads internally. If you have a good, strong admission staff, I would almost start from scratch and think of a different way of getting leads versus going out and purchasing a list buy. You can always do that just to have your prospects. But over the years, I just have not seen those list buys, those larger list buys being, truthfully, really qualifying through the funnel. And that's been a big shift, I think, especially for higher leadership, because they've always depended, and it's almost like a security blanket. I mean, sure. People don't want to go to sleep without it. They don't want to start the season without it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Once a doctor once told me that medical education is a funny thing. It stops the moment you graduate medical school. And, he was a little tongue in cheek, but basically saying what you were taught when you graduate in med school, what you were taught in your residency, you carry, there's continuing ed and all that, but you carry those patterns, you carry those beliefs about how things are done all the way through your medical career. And I do feel like for a lot of academic leaders, it's kind of a similar thing that if you had a hand in this 10 or 15 years ago, list buys were a much more important thing. And I love that security blanket analogy that you use because it does seem that way. It's tough to put that down and think, oh, alternatives to lead generation. And that also really tracks with what we've been hearing from clients now for a few years of, at a certain point, there's no more names to buy. You can't expand. You can only expand that list of, you can only expand the parameters of your list buy and like you said, expect to actually get a return on that for so long. Yeah. And I think a lot of institutions, if they aren't there already, they got there a couple of years back of, okay, there's no more lists to buy, no more names to buy that's going to move the needle for us in a meaningful way.
Yeah, it's how you're qualifying, I think, your inquiries as they're coming in, and gauging, in what way are they engaging with the institution? For us, we started before I had left, really looking at the inquiries that were in the CRM and qualifying them and saying, you know what, and looking at the yield percentages based off of the different populations and the number of touches they had throughout the journey. And for us, that list buy really didn't yield when you got through to the end of the journey. You look at somebody that came on a group visit with a high school to a college campus as a freshman, just as like a introduction to college life type of campus tour. As a freshman, they had more of a chance of going through the funnel and getting to the end versus a list by name that you were paying for and sending mail pieces to. I mean, you're not just purchasing the name. And I think that's where people lose sight of how much these names cost, because you're not just purchasing the name when you buy the name, you're paying for them in so many other ways. I mean, you're putting together inquiry packets. If colleges still do, and I am old school in the sense of, I believe in mail. I still believe in mail. I still believe in sending that view book, in sending that piece home, because that parent, that influencer, whoever it is, or to the guidance, the school counselors, that piece of information is still important to this generation of.
I was going to say, and the research backs that up.
Yeah. And to me, but like, people need to realize, like, postage is expensive, and a lot of people don't have that line in their budget when they're thinking about, hey, we're going to mail inquiry packets to these 300,000 names that we've purchased, or, you have to think through how much this name is going to fully cost, and how much the cost of a student is when you get down to the brass tacks. And when you're talking about mailing them a view book, when you're talking about mailing them any type of in-person swag, for example, like if you want to mail them something to engage them, to get them to start an application or visit campus, all of that costs money. Everything costs money for the student. And the list by methodology, it's expensive. It's really expensive right now.
Well, similar note then for what would you tell someone? So let's talk about parents and prospective students and so forth. Given all your experience, given what you've known, and I know there's been a number of, we'll say, best-selling books that have covered this topic, but what do you feel like, what would you tell them as a former director of admissions and in your position now about this whole process, the whole college search and selection process that maybe they don't realize?
Speaking to parents and influencers, the price tag is scary, no matter what you're looking at. It is always a scary endeavor to take on. But you want to find the right fit for your student, and finding that best fit is not only beneficial for the school, because the school does make an investment in your student, but it's really for you as well. So I would be doing a lot of homework and starting early. For me, I am still in the old school mindset of, hey, sophomore, junior year, start talking, start having the conversations, start introducing them to different institutions. It doesn't have to be necessarily the 4-year private institution or public institution. There are many different paths. There are 2-year universities. There's just so many different ways to go about it nowadays, and be flexible with that, because it is your son or daughter, it is your child that's going through the process. And I know that being involved is very important, because you want to make sure it's the best decision for your student, but giving your child all of the information that they possibly could have up front of, here are your options. And I do want to make this plug, and I'm probably going to get from my admissions friends that are still in the industry, don't introduce colleges and universities to your child when you know that you A, can't afford it, or B, don't want your child to take on that level of debt. Don't get your child wrapped into a situation where they're being worked by an admissions staff. They fall in love with the school. They fall in love with some sort of aspect of the school, but brass tacks, bottom dollar, it's not going to work. Don't give them that false hope. I would be very realistic with them up front and say, here, these are options. You don't necessarily have to go to a 4-year. You can go here, you can go there, you can do this, you can do that, but just be very realistic with them up front. Because affordability is a big, I would say, tense conversation in the spring for a lot of families, that kids are ending up brokenhearted because their parents are saying, no, we can't do it. Don't even get them down that path if you can't do it. And be very, very open to different types of journeys, because every student is different, and every child is different. One child may go to a 4-year university and do really well. Another one of your kids may do really well with going into the workforce for a little bit and then coming back as an adult learner. I would be very flexible depending on what type of needs they have in that moment.
That makes sense. That really makes sense. I did want to pick up on something. This is really random. You had mentioned micro admissions versus macro admissions, and I get the concept, but I'm not sure everybody does. Tell us a little bit about what that means, the difference, micro versus macro admissions.
Number one, you need, before you can make any decisions on micro recruitment or micro yielding, you need to understand your data, and being able to pull your data, having somebody that can decipher the data. That is huge. So if you don't have an operations team within the admissions enrollment department, try to advocate for one. That analyst or find a marketing partner that does have the capability to analyze data. You want to be able to assess and analyze data 2 years before COVID, and then the 2 years after COVID, where we're at right now. And you want to be able to start to gain insights into your funnel that way. You want to be able to look at each territory. How did each geographic territory yield? Where was our sweet spot in that certain territory? And it's like I said, it's micro recruitment and then micro yielding. So micro recruitment is going out there, hitting your top feeder schools. You need to sit down and you need to make a list with your enrollment team and say, where are our top feeder schools in each geographic territory? How are we treating them? What are our relationships like with those school counselors? How are we working with those students? Are we sending them special messages? Are we working with them by not just visiting the high school? Because a lot of schools, to be honest with you, ever since COVID have ditched the high school visit. I mean, they're back, but they're not fully back yet. So how are we treating those top feeder school geographic territories? Are you going to a Starbucks and are you alerting these parent influencers, these students, that you're going to be at a Starbucks for an hour and a half in the evening on Tuesday, November 3rd? Come and talk to me if you can't come and talk to me during school because you have an AP class that you can't get out of while I'm there. There's a lot of challenges in visiting high schools nowadays, and getting to see students. So how are you making that connection? So really looking at that data, looking at all of your inquiries. What is a qualified inquiry versus not a qualified inquiry? Are you looking at how many touch points they've had? Did they visit campus? What type of campus visit did they have? Are they a recruited athlete? Did they add your profile on niche, for example? How are you looking at your inquiry sources and how are you qualifying them? And then how are you working that into your travel planning and working that into an instant decision day? Are you looking at your top feeder schools and saying, hey, I'm going to come visit you and do instant decision days on the spot. I'll accept you on the spot and give you a preliminary scholarship range as long as the academic information you're representing at the time is accurate. So that's that micro recruitment piece. How are we getting in the weeds? And then how are they responding? So are they visiting campus? Are they applying? And that's where you start to look at the funnel. And from there, micro yielding, I mean, you're jumping into, again, that funnel and you're saying, did they visit campus? Did they file a FAFSA? Are they completed or incompleted? They're just, did they visit the microsite? Did they, and you can track all of that information with your marketing partner, is being able to see when they've hit, how many times they've hit. And that shows engagement. Did they sign up for an accepted students day? If not, you need to push them to do that. But all of that is done with a very careful eye and being able to have your dashboards in front of you and being able to discern what each dashboard is saying. And I hate being like this, but and my partners, my peers in higher ed will probably laugh that I'm saying this, but especially for micro yielding, we start doing hot, medium, cold lists. And that has really helped us reframe what type of students we're going after and how we're speaking to them. So hot, medium, cold lists.
There you go. You said some interesting things there of about dashboards, for example. It's interesting to me how many enrollment marketers and then directors of enrollment and admissions and so forth don't have that kind of handle on their data. Just don't have that traction, as we say in the business world, into their data, don't have those looks and views. Why do you think that is? And what can institutions do about it?
Oh, it's budget.
Okay.
It's budget. And I can tell you, I had it, I was doing it before I had it, and then I was doing it when I did have it. And it's a heck of a lot easier and a lot more fun too, when you get to look at the dashboards and you get to see the student's journey. But it's totally budget. I mean, you have institutions that are like, okay, we know we have to move to a CRM. We know we need some sort of customer management system. Do we go with Slate? Do we go with Salesforce? What are we going to do? We got to pick one or the two, because really there's not many others out there that I would say are competitive enough to stand up to the test. So you're looking at one of the two. they're expensive. Dana, you know that.
Oh
They're
yeah.
so expensive. And not only are they expensive, but you get one option where they basically frame it for you and then you build everything on your own. If you
Yep.
don't have if you don't have a proper IT operations, but an admissions operations person to be able to look through the lens of a recruiter and be able like to set up those dashboards the way a recruiter needed, it took me 2 years to do that before I left my institution. And I'm not an operations person, but
Mm-hmm.
I told my director of operations, who's not a recruiter, what I needed, and then she built it. And then it just, there needs to be a relationship there. But if you don't have that, and then if you don't have the budget to pay for Salesforce or Slate to create all of that for you, um, you're really in a tough position. So
Sure.
you can pull the lists, but you don't really know what you're doing with the list because you don't know how to measure it based off of the dashboard, what it's telling you.
Yeah, that's really been something we've consistently seen over the past couple of years as well. I always joke too with the CRM system. It's like an 18-speed bicycle. Most people know how to use 3 gears, but you have this sense of like, okay, I've got this figured out, but I know there's so much more that we could have done. And when we made the justification for this huge financial investment, we thought we were going to be able to do so much more, and we just can't quite get there. How do you pick a good partner to help you with that? I mean, obviously, it's something we do at VisionPoint, and it's a capability we've expanded because we've seen that demand. But how do you pick a good partner to do that?
You need to have a partner that's going to understand in my mind, the weeds of admissions and enrollment. And you need to be able to have somebody come in and be honest with you about the operation and really take a 10,000-foot view of what is happening strategically, and then be able to understand what it takes in the weeds to make the things happen on the top. And that's a very general way of explaining it, but you need to be able to find a partner that gets enrollment and that gets admissions and can speak directly to the recruiters in their language. And it's hard. I've seen other agencies that have really kind of put it out there, but haven't been able to back up the specialization that's needed. And every school, it's that sea of sameness.
Yep.
You need to find a partner that's going to understand you as an institution,
Yep.
not just loop you into, hey, this is a 4-year, hey, this is a 2-year, this is a small, this is a big. You need to find a partner that's going to be distinctive in finding what makes that institution different, capitalize on it, and then plug in the holes where there's weaknesses. And it's not even weaknesses, or I would just say areas that need help. It's not necessarily weakness. It's just like, I need help here.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, we've really seen that at VisionPoint of seeing that merge of marketing and enrollment happening, and then being able to really hire professionals like yourself who've been on the enrollment side of the fence as well as the marketing side of the fence to understand where those pieces fit together and to understand those. Just understand the challenges, but also understand where the opportunities lie in things like getting that traction on your data and so forth. It's, I don't know, it's an interesting time in that regard, but
there's so many different nuances to the admissions process and the populations that you serve and different messaging. And you need a partner that's going to be nimble, that's going to be able to swiftly move with you and just kind of hear you out. I mean, I've found that working with a lot of the clients that I have, sometimes they just need somebody to lean on and to talk to and talk through the challenges and to brainstorm how they can approach it internally without drawing so much on resources. So it's you need a strategic partner in it as well.
Now, I mentioned before that we've been seeing this meld over the past decade or so of marketing and enrollment and so forth. What do you think it is that most marketing people don't get about enrollment people? And what do you think it is most enrollment people don't get about marketing people within the higher ed context, if you will?
Oh my gosh. So, and it's funny you bring this up because before I had left my position, I had started to invite the communications director in the marketing office to start doing college fairs and start to get the experience behind the table, talking to families, being in the moment, being able to understand the sales mentality that goes into the job and the pressure. And then she started inviting me into the weeds of understanding different messaging and understand the different ways that design works into a view book. And she started to teach me what a view book, how it's put together, and having that opportunity to cross train and shadow was invaluable. I would definitely say to any marketing professional that is looking to learn more about admissions, I would invite them to do a college night with an admission counselor, do one evening of phone calling to prospective students in the recruitment phase where you are trying to get them to apply, and then do one evening in the yield phase where you're trying to get them to deposit and or talk about your financial aid package and affordability. And I would invite them to also go to any type of events on campus, because that's going to give you, like, you want to see your institution's juju on that day. So you want to be able to bottle that up and be able to put that into your communications, because that is typically when the magic happens, is when students visit campus and they become really drawn. So I would say that type of relationship. And then for any type of enrollment professional, oh my goodness, if I could have gone back and really understood what each platform did, what each ad set meant, be able to lean on my marketing agency more with assisting me in just the general messaging of retargeting students that haven't visited campus yet, that need to apply, or they need to visit, or they need to fill out their FAFSA. Really understanding how each channel worked and the metrics. I would implore them to really start to dig their heels into that. And it's so hard because the summer used to be the time where admissions professionals got the opportunity to have downtime, to actually go on a vacation, and learn more about their responsibilities within their, aside from their recruitment responsibilities. And the summer has just turned into not losing a student because, you can go after students now. So it's during the summer, it's a war zone. At least it was where I was.
War zone actually is a pretty good description for a lot of,
during the summer, it's not, it used to be a really nice time for admissions. Now you're just biting your fingernails and you're hoping that everybody shows up, or they're not coming back to you with, hey, this school just offered me this much more money and I'm going to go there unless you can meet that number, and it gets really messy.
It's funny. I think about one of my favorite shows watching in 2022 was Succession. I don't know if you ever had a chance to watch that. Yes, such a good show, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
there's that spot where the main character says, "What is life? It's a number on a piece of paper. It's a fight for a knife in the mud." I feel like college admissions went from being something a little bit more of the Kendall version of trying to explore and find holistic and beautiful thoughts to just for a lot of folks now, especially post NACAC.
Yes.
It's a number on a piece of paper. It's a fight for a student in the mud, as it were. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of institutions out there that are kind of like, in my mind, like Shiv, from Succession.
Yes.
They get what they get because they're first in line. They have it. But there's all these other colleges out there that are scrapping and that are really working, like your Kendalls or your Romans, and it's they're fighting for their chance to shine as well. And you never know, they may come up and snag one of your students away. And I've been seeing it happen. It's there's been times where I've been surprised that I've stolen a student, not intentionally, but gotten a student that that really could have gone to a more prestigious name, but the fit was better with my institution, and that worked, and we got him.
I'm not gonna ask you to name names here, but I love what you just set up here, right? Is if we think about the Roy children in Succession, and then think about what types of institutions are right. Like you said, there's Shiv, who is in line. She's got the pedigree. She plays the game. She looks the part and just is expecting it to just kind of roll in. I feel like you have the Kendalls who are, that's maybe the most who are struggling. Yeah. And they want to do the right thing, and it's just like the game keeps changing on them, and they're hooked, they're addicted to things that they're not, but like list buys and all this stuff. Yeah. And it's just, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Yes. And then you have the Romans who, maybe Roman Roy, who is maybe not afraid to, a little bit more amoral, kind of just looking out, but also doesn't quite get it, kind of thing. And then I think about Connor Roy, right? Like, the Connor Roys are out there still, like those smaller institutions that are just like, hey, and it just seems to work out for them.
Yeah, it just seems to work out.
They make all sorts of mistakes, but it's like a clown car crashing into a gold mine. It just works out and it's fine. We have nailed this. We have figured out. Yes, that is exactly Succession characters. Yes, in terms of different institutions. Yeah, I love that.
But who's Logan?
I'm trying to figure that out as well. Who is Logan? See, I think Logan is like the Department of Ed. No, it's not exactly right. Logan is U.S. News and World Report and the College Board and all those people. Like, the kings of the whole thing, and they feel it all shifting under their feet, and they're lashing out of who will be my favorite. And, yes.
Oh my gosh, you nailed it. You got it.
Oh, that is perfect. Yeah.
Out of anything out of this podcast, we have learned that higher ed has turned into Succession.
Now here's my question. Does that make people like us, Cousin Greg and Tom Wamsgam, you know what I mean? Is that who we are? Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean,
I don't know.
I think that there's uses for us. And then there's also the good intentions.
Yes.
And that is what I don't want to be missed out of all of our conversation, is anybody that is in higher ed or that is working in higher ed has some sort of value system that wants to see people succeed, and that wants to see students attain an education that fits for them.
And that might be where the Succession model breaks apart a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. And I think that that's probably where it does break. You're right. And, I know that no matter what, you want to see you do want to see schools succeed in their right fit, in their right niche market. But you need the Toms, and you need the good people on your side to help you get there, that have your best intentions.
Indeed. I don't know a more perfect place to end it than that, but really appreciate the conversation. This has been great.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah,
Thanks for having me.
really appreciate you taking the time.